Kia ora anō, Graham Smith here with Mei Winitana. Today we're talking about Wairuatanga, and there's really 4 questions. What is it? How does this help me as a tutor? What's an example? And hopefully, Mei, you've got a story or something to talk about. What's the application here? What's something I can do? What are the next steps for me as I try to implement this value in a way that underpins what I know and what I do? Auntie Mei, what is it?
Oh, Wairuatanga. By golly, Graham. Wairuatanga. Wairuatanga means the spirit or the soul of a person, but it's actually bigger than that. It's the non-physical part of us. I've been told it is ignited in the fetus upon conception. And again, Wairua, if that's the spirit in the mind, the tanga at the end of Wairuatanga gives it that meaning of spirituality. Some people think it's related to religion, and it can be, but independent of whether it's a religion or not, everyone has a wairua, a spark of the mind, the spirit, the soul.
This one is pretty deep, and I think of I've got friends in the United States, and I know that the education situation in the US is very different to what we have in New Zealand, and conversations about spirituality, it's almost like you can't talk about that stuff in school or in training. So I feel very fortunate that, it's open for us to be able to embrace spirituality as part of what we do. And I guess what I'm hearing from you is it's not pigeonholed or siloed to a particular thing. It might be Christianity, but it doesn't necessarily need to be Christianity. It could be something else, or it could be a whole range of aspects of spirituality. Is that correct?
In our multicultural society that we are growing right now, we have various ethnic groups and religious groups: Islamic, Ringatu, Baha'i faith, Catholic, and they all have different expressions of spirituality. And we as tutors need to be aware of those types of spirituality, of Wairuatanga within the room, especially among our learners, because there are different practices that may offend.
So let's pick up on that, because the next question is, for me as a tutor, let's say I'm growing in my awareness of Wairuatanga. How does this help me, or how can I use it, or what benefit does it give me in the classroom? And you're just talking about the fact that if I'm aware of the beliefs or the practices of others, then I can be more conscious of what's going to offend or not offend. So I wonder whether you could expand on that, or just talk about some of the other benefits, perhaps reasons why it might be important to understand Wairuatanga for a tutor in the classroom.
I think it bodes us as tutors, as educators, to do our homework before we meet our students. Forearmed is better than having to deal with the fallout afterwards. So, you can't always guarantee that it's going to happen. We have a saying in Te Reo Māori, hiki te wairua, which means to uplift the spirit. Now, the opposite to that is patu wairua, which means diminish or belittle the spirit. And we do that in so many ways. We can do that. We can do it in the tone of our voice, in our actions. Like before, manaakitanga, we can project it as the non-verbal messages we give with our eyes. When we look someone up and down in a judgmental way, we all do it. We can do it. And it can be really demeaning, or it can uplift the spirit. Got a good example.
Okay, let's hear it. That was going to be my next question. Can you give us a little illustration for this?
I did a workshop in a regional town on enhancing Māori cultural capability, and we were talking about Wairuatanga because they had in their midst a community of Seventh-day Adventists. And I said, "Oh, how do you get on with those learners?" And they told me, "What do you mean, how do you get on?" "Well, do you get on well with them?" And they said, "This is the tutors." "Yes, we do." "And how have you adapted to their different beliefs?" Now, one of their beliefs, forgive me if I'm wrong, is that they do not eat a meal with people who don't follow the Adventist church. I said, "And how did you deal with that?" "Oh, simple. This was great." They asked the Seventh-day people how they might be able to address this little matter, and they came up with, "Well, perhaps we might be able to have lunch at a separate time," and that was acceptable to the whole group. So this group ate separately, but they still socialized. They just ate separately. That was a reasonable solution to a little glitch in their practice.
A potentially tricky problem. Yeah.
It could have been, but it wasn't.
The next question, what can I do next? So Wairuatanga, obviously we've been talking in general. What are some things that people can do? Perhaps some action steps, or some simple things that you could do in the classroom to
Yeah.
uplift the wairua of your learners?
It bodes us, in the first instance, to acknowledge our own spirituality. If you think you don't, then that's fine. We're all different in how we perceive our spirituality. If we are of a particular religious leaning, that's okay. I think eventually, even though we may not say so, it exudes through the way we teach. You might want to address that, number one, as one of the early conversations that you have with your learners, what religions are represented in the room. And it's amazing some of the similarities and differences that people have, and start talking about how we might cope in the learning situation to acknowledge all those beliefs and practices.
Some organisations have practices where tutors are expected to do things. These are just simple things, but as part of the practice in the classroom, opening with a karakia and finishing with a karakia. And I know different people have different feelings about those kind of things, but when I've seen it in action and when I've been able to do it myself, regardless of whatever I believe and whatever the range of beliefs are in the classroom, in my experience, which I know is limited, but in my experience, it's always been a positive thing and people have appreciated it. So little things like that, does that come into Wairuatanga as well, mate?
Definitely. Well, if you think of karakia being a blessing or thanks or a spiritual uplifting, there are many ways to do that. I've seen Gaelic and Islamic one, a Ringatu one, a Samoan one. There are many different ways to do that. And, basically, they all mean the same thing, looking for spiritual guidance to have a wonderful experience for that day or that time. I think it opens up more wonderful possibilities.
And great opportunities for conversations,
Oh, yes.
at break time and things like that.
Yeah.
So that's just a little bit of an introduction to Wairuatanga. Thanks for tuning in for that one today. Thanks very much, mate.